Hello and welcome to our special show, Coronavirus Facts versus Myths. I'm Gargi Rawat. This is the show where we get you all the latest on the pandemic. We'll also answer your questions, so do call in if you have any questions. Our doctors will take those questions for you. Well, our first focus on the show, India's new COVID cases fell below 2 lakh for the first time since April 14th, as 1.96 lakh fresh cases pushed the total cases to 2.69 crore. This even as 3,511 patients died in 24 hours. Many states, remember, are scrambling to get vaccines amid a big shortage. India vaccinated only over 24 lakh people in 24 hours, which remains a huge concern. Experts say we should be vaccinating at 80 lakh per day. Now, a big focus on the show, drug major Roche India has announced the launch of its first batch of antibody cocktail against COVID. The monoclonal antibody cocktail is priced at 59,750 per dose. This antibody cocktail was given to former US President Donald Trump last year when he had contracted COVID. The drug will be available through leading hospitals and COVID treatment centers, and it has been shown, according to reports, to help those high-risk patients before their condition worsens, reducing the risk of hospitalization and fatality by a huge 70%. Well, to talk more about it, we're joined by Dr. Rahul Pandit, member Maharashtra COVID Task Force. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us again on your show, and sparing your time. First and foremost, how promising is this therapy? The price, though, seems very high.
Hi, Gargi. Good afternoon. I agree with you. The price is very, very high for a drug which won't be priced in the range of 60,000 or so, 50,000 or so. But when you ask me about how promising it is, we need to understand that the risk which they are talking about is a relative risk reduction of 70%, not an absolute risk reduction of 70%. There's a difference between the two. That means when they did the study, they had one group which received the placebo, one group which may have received the antibodies which we are talking about. And it is the relative risk which was between the two groups which was reduced by 70%. It's not going to actually decrease the absolute risk by 70%.
Right. This was under very clinical circumstances that the study was done. Also, this therapy, it can be used only in the early stages. Also, the patients need to then come to the hospital for administration of this therapy. If you could tell us a bit about that.
So the group of patients which were studied were the outpatients who were essentially being treated at home, who were within the first 3 days or 4 days of their onset of symptoms, and essentially were not requiring any oxygen, and were not requiring increasing the oxygen level if they were already on oxygen for non-COVID reasons. So there are COPD patients who are already on oxygen who are high risk, and they had to fall into the high risk category. The high risk category being patients who were diabetics, patients who were having obesity, patients who were having hypertension, kidney disease. These were the high-risk patients who were sort of thought to worsen if the disease progressed in them. They have to come to a hospital, and under supervised conditions, they have to take the dose. It is available in intravenous and subcutaneous form. I don't know which form is going to be available in India. I think it is going to be the intravenous form which is going to be available in India. So it's like a drip which we have to give, and obviously watch for some reactions. And after an hour of the drip, the patient can be safely sent back home. And that reduces the risk of their hospitalization is what is being talked about. And they certainly have got the phase 2 data, which has been published in a journal. The phase 3 data is not published in any medical peer review journal, but it is available on the website of the Regeneron company. And that's where all the information about phase 3 is coming. They've certainly studied around 4,000 odd patients in the treatment as well as in the placebo arm, 2,000 odd in each arm, and that's where this 70% relative risk reduction comes in.
Right, Doctor. So how effective has this been in the United States? Again, it's a very expensive therapy, though in the US now they've moved so rapidly with their vaccinations that they don't actually require to use this as much.
Correct. So if we can ramp up our vaccination program as well, you would probably not need to use this antibody because vaccination provides you with a mild disease anyways. So this kind of an antibody would be useful for our population who can be in a high risk category, who are still in the mild to moderate phase of the disease and not requiring admission or not requiring oxygen. But most important constraining factor is going to be, I can see on the screen you put up the price of 59,750. If that's the correct price, almost 60,000.
Well, that's for one dose and you need a combination. So it comes actually to 1.2 2 lakh, around that much. But doctors have also said that can be split between 2 patients, and they've said that the cost of hospitalization would be much more.
Yes, so one vial I think has got equivalence of 2 doses, so they can use it between the 2 patients. But I think there is a storage time with 48 hours or so. You need to have 2 patients who will be able to use it within 48 hours. But still, regardless of that, it still puts it out of reach for majority of us as Indians. It does bring down the hospitalization, but it is still very, very heavy on the pocket for many of us to actually be able to afford that.
And very briefly, can it be used on children?
No, I don't think there are any studies which have been done on children. This is all adult population is what I believe has been studied only. And we know that it is the high-risk population which they sort of categorically looked at.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on that, Dr. Rahul Pandit. And do stay on for our viewer question segment. We're going to now focus on another issue on the show. And we've heard about black fungus and white fungus cases being reported in COVID patients. But now there's a case of yellow fungus, which we're told is more dangerous as it starts internally. This case of yellow fungus has been reported in UP's Ghaziabad district. It's called Mucor septicus. Well, to talk more about this, we're joined by Dr. B.P. Tyagi, HOD, Columbia Asia Hospital in Ghaziabad. Thank you so much, Dr. Tyagi, for taking your time out and joining us. Tell us about this case that has been detected in your hospital.
See, Gargi, this case came to me 2 days back. His name is Kuwar Singh. He's 59 years old. He's diabetic. He suffered from COVID 1 month back. He was not on oxygen at all. He was admitted with loss of appetite, mild vertigo and fatigue, extreme fatigue, and discharges from nose, left side of nose, with blackish and some yellowish discharge from the nose.
Right, sir. So this is one case that has come to you. We're also told that it's more dangerous than the other cases of fungus in a sense, because this is something that starts internally. So it's very important to catch it early.
Yes. This patient has all the fungi. One is yellow, one is white, one is black. As this patient have all the fungi, his immunity is less, means he is immunocompromised patient because he is diabetic, and he catches all the fungi. Yellow fungus is dangerous because the wound created by yellow fungus won't be healed early. It will take around years together to heal, and in white fungus and black fungus, it takes around 4 to 6 weeks to heal.
Right, sir. So this particular patient actually had all 3 cases of the fungus infection. The news of this, of course, has been very alarming. But would you say that cases of the yellow fungus would remain very rare?
Yes, it is rare case. It's found in lizards and reptiles. As you know, the name is Mucor septicus. It may cause sepsis. Sepsis means septicemia, and septicemia may cause multi-organ failure. It may occur in all the fungi, but this yellow fungus is more prone to that.
Right, sir. And it's interesting also that you said your patient hadn't received any oxygen support, because that's one of the things that is being looked at, whether, it's industrial oxygen or the tubing or some sort of, how it may not be hygienic enough. And that is what is leading to cases of this fungal infection.
Yes, he has not received any oxygen during COVID illness.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. B.P. Tyagi, for speaking to us here at NDTV. So the first case being reported there of yellow fungus. In fact, the unfortunate patient has all 3 cases of fungal infection. And interesting that he hadn't received any sort of oxygen support. Well, it's time now for our viewer question segment. And we have Dr. Rahul back with us. I'd first like to start with a tweet question that we received, Doctor. And Tushar writes in to us that negligible cases around the world of fungus in recovered COVID patients. They too use steroids. This is Arjun. They too use steroids. Why are we seeing it in India? Is it due to the use of industrial oxygen tanks for medical use? Because this is something that has really spread among people. If you could answer that.
Look, I think we need to go back to the basics. The mucormycosis incidence in India has been several folds higher than other countries. We have known that for a long, long time. And the reason why it happens is a uncontrolled blood glucose. And that is what probably is the single largest reason. We can, of course, debate that it was industrial oxygen or it was the lack of the tubings or the hygiene, the water and stuff. None of them has been substantiated or microbiologically proven at all. I think what remains the fact is that what we know, we should concentrate on that. If the blood glucose is normal and you are able to control your sugar, trust me, you are not that immunosuppressed and you will not get an infection. Right now, the spores are around me, are around you as well, which are there. Are they infecting us? If we are healthy, they are not going to infect us. So if our sugar is controlled, which oxygen you use, it doesn't probably matter. We should probably be immunocompetent, and that is only achieved if you have a good glucose control, even if you're on steroids.
All right. Well, we have another caller now. Bharat joining us on the phone line. Go ahead with your question.
Hello, sir. The new variants are more transmissible than the original Wuhan variant. So is it possible that the future variants become less transmissible and the pandemic ends not due to herd immunity, but due to the virus becoming weaker? Because I read somewhere that it was the combination of both factors that led to the ending of the Spanish flu.
Right, doctor?
Look, I could only say tumhare muh mein ghee shakkar, and that, obviously that's possible. Both the things are possible. It's the virus mutates. The mutation is natural for the virus. It can mutate to become more infectious. It can mutate to become less infection and could die down on its own. I wish that happens, but we can't be hoping for it to happen. That's why vaccination is important. But certainly possibilities are there. Both the possibilities are there. No doubt about that.
Because we've had other infections come and go, H1N1, etc. We have another caller from Ahmedabad, Maitri Mangraj calling in. Maitri, apna prashn puchiye.
Doctor, just I have a question that we have almost 4 weeks after recovering from the COVID, and can we take the vaccine right now? As per the government circular, it is now 3 months. Is it more scientific, or as per the earlier circular, can we take after 6 weeks? Can you advise?
No, sir. I think the government notification which has come is absolutely based on science, and you should wait for 3 months, which is around 12 weeks time, for your vaccine to be taken up after COVID. So please don't be in a hurry. Most patients will develop some antibodies after having a COVID-19 infection, and that is why this time frame has been given up as 3 months. So please take your vaccine when the 3 months time comes to you, sir.
Right. Follow the guidelines that have been laid down and put forward by the team. Thank you so much, Dr. Rahul Pandit, for joining us and answering all those questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, with that, time for us to slip into a short break. More on the other side. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now on the show, we're joined by Anirban Mahapatra, Assistant Director and Publisher at the American Chemical Society, who recently wrote a book, COVID, Separating Fact from Fiction. In the book, he writes, there's an ocean of information on COVID, only some of it is accurate. Thank you so much for joining us, Anirban. Now, your book came out earlier this year, just after the first wave, and things have changed drastically now with the second wave.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your program. It's a pleasure to be here. I wrote this book basically actually warning of a number of things that actually happened to play out. I think in January and February, when this book was about to come out, I had mentioned that we don't know why the first wave has gone down. And so you might see a reversal of all those trends causing another rise. Now, obviously, no one could have predicted the manner in which the peak actually turned out to be a tsunami. But I think we should have showed more caution and more humility at the time. I was at a pretty good stopping point for the book because we knew about the variants, we knew about the vaccines. But again, like I said, nobody could have predicted the magnitude of the failure to respond to this second wave.
Right, absolutely. And, you've also spoken about the infodemic. What are some of the fallacies that you've seen around coronavirus?
Well, we just touched on one of them, which is that people thought that it would go away after the first wave, which painfully has been shown to be wrong. The other thing is that everyone is thinking that it's not possible to prevent the disease. It is possible to take measures to prevent it, and prevention is always better than what we're seeing right now, because we know our healthcare system is overburdened. And if you have to go to the hospital and there's no oxygen, then like all bets are off at that stage. So all the measures that can be taken to prevent the disease are first and foremost what have to be undertaken. I would say also that even right now, there is a pandemic of overprescription of drugs that are of dubious benefit and don't seem to work. I mean, I was just talking to a relative who has received a prescription. He's a young person of 12 drugs, including steroids, and he has a mild, limiting case of COVID-19. So antibiotics which treat bacterial infections are not necessary until there is a chance of a bacterial co-infection. There have been desperate calls for convalescent plasma, but in most cases it's ineffective and may actually be contributing to a rise of variants in people who have weak immune systems. And now this whole thing with this black fungus mucormycosis, which is being exacerbated in patients who have uncontrolled diabetes and are being given steroid drugs, which are dampening their immune responses right now. So all this together is creating this extra burden of disease, when in many cases it is a self-limiting form of disease. So I would say there are a lot of myths, particularly around drugs right now.
No, absolutely. That has created a lot of confusion in the minds of the people. With plasma therapy being taken away, then remdesivir is no longer approved by WHO. So a lot of talk about the overuse of steroids. There's also been a big controversy over Ayurvedic medicine here.
Yeah, I don't see any, from my perspective, I don't see any difference between allopathy, Ayurveda, homeopathy. It's either evidence-based medicine, which has been shown in a gold standard randomized clinical trial to work in people, or it doesn't. And unfortunately, because of the way COVID-19 is, we have to live with the fact that there is no magic bullet for it. Because initially, when the virus infects people with that's at the viral stage, the viremia stage, where antivirals can work. After that, it's your immune system that is acting against it. So initially it's a respiratory disease, then it's a vascular disease, it can be an immunological disease, it can infect various parts of the body. So there is no one outcome and there is no one drug that works. So you have to specify what the endpoint is for that treatment and use that drug in that specific case. And I think there is a bit of a lack of awareness, at least in people, that they're thinking that, okay, this drug works for all situations, which it doesn't. So I think that's part of the problem.
You also have people sharing, their doctor's prescriptions with one another, and that's another huge problem that we're seeing. The worry also in this particular wave is that the COVID infection has gone deep into rural India, where the awareness is very, very limited. There are reports of how typhoid cases have increased in villages. There's talk of mysterious fevers as well.
Yeah, I mean, we are only seeing the tip of the iceberg in terms of the reported numbers. Possibly 15 to 20 times as many people are getting infected. And that means that many times more people are also dying. I think once we have the final analysis, we will have to look at the excess deaths as well in the entire country and compare them with the previous months and with the previous years to see what the actual toll of this pandemic is. And I don't think we have a true reckoning of that right now, as you mentioned, especially in the rural areas, because if somebody is not diagnosed with COVID-19, then if they die later, then that's not coded as a COVID-19 death. A lot of people are dying of comorbidities as well, and they're being coded as perhaps a heart attack or other illnesses, as you mentioned, instead of COVID-19. So we have to look at it from a holistic perspective.
Right. Many experts have pointed out how India is underreporting its numbers, how some states are worse in this than others. If you could explain to us, why is it so important for us to have that accurate, transparent data?
I think you always have to know the truth, because even if the truth is uncomfortable, it allows you to prepare. if you know how many people have been infected, if you know how many people have died, especially the infected part, if you know that, then you can make an assumption of how many people might be protected from that third wave. I think that is definitely a very important point. In terms of the death, then you get a sense of how severe the disease is and how it compares in India with respect to other parts of the world. And you can also try to see which treatments work. So I think that's also important. And then with respect to prioritizing vaccines, that also comes into play, because if you know who has been infected before, then they likely have some sort of immunity, at least for a few months. And so maybe they can be not at the front of the line with respect to getting vaccinated first, because vaccines are right now a very scarce commodity. We only have about 3-4% of the population that has been fully vaccinated. And so we want the vulnerable people to be vaccinated first. But in order to know that, we also have to know who has already been infected and have the true sense of those numbers.
Right, and if we talk about, the way out of this pandemic, it is through vaccinations that we will, stop the chain of infections. And the longer this infection remains and circulating in the population, we are going to see more variants.
You're absolutely right. Variants rise because there's more scope, there's more space for variants to rise as more people get infected. The evolutionary space is much larger. And that is certainly a fact, that we may see more variants arise from the background right now that we have. So let's say if it's B1617, then it would be the next set of descendants that arise from that. And over time, that could definitely be very, very problematic. But I think vaccinations are not going to solve the problem immediately. And I think this is the most unfortunate part of it. It takes time for the vaccination capacity to be built up, for people to get vaccinated, for people to get both doses. So it's not going to help us in the immediate term with the wave right now. I think measures to protect people, those have to be implemented right now. We need masking measures, oxygen, ventilators. I think these numbers can be brought down with some of the measures that we're seeing in many of the states that have been affected. And I think where necessary, makeshift hospitals in the immediate term would definitely help. I think over the longer period of time, that's where vaccines will help to protect a larger proportion of the population.
Right.
But in the broader and longer term, we need to build up our healthcare capacity. I think there's no question about that. No country can deal with a pandemic that is unmitigated. But if we look at the states that have done well, they have had a very good response and also very robust healthcare system.
Right, Anirban, definitely I think prioritizing our healthcare systems is one of the big learnings after this pandemic. Thank you so much for speaking to us here on NDTV.